This episode of Grounded in Maine is sponsored by ESG Review. ESG Review magazine is published quarterly in February, May, August, and November, and is available for free in print and digital formats. ESG Review is devoted to environmental, social, and governance strategies, technologies, and investments. ESGreview.net is updated every Wednesday with 8 new stories and is home to feature articles, news items, and more. Visit esgreview.net to stay informed and help us spark the collaboration and awareness needed to develop sustainable economies and communities around the world.
There's a place where there's no trouble, no more pain, no more struggle.
Grounded in Maine podcast is an open conversation about how we show up for the world. I started this podcast out of a desire to learn new ways to be sustainable because the word sustainability is big. It can be overwhelming, and I just wanted to learn, different ways to try to be part of the solution and not feel like it's too late. So I am talking to people who are doing different things and learning so much. I hope that you are too.
Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Fagan. My guest today is Brekke Wagoner. She is in North Carolina, and she is a preparedness enthusiast. That's what I'm going to call her. She's going to go into that more obviously. I called her a prepper in the intro, and that was a little not harsh. It's just it has its own sort of meaning, and it's not untrue. It's just it has, like I said, it has its own meaning, and sometimes it's not a super positive meaning. So it just is. It's something that is. It's a term that's used a lot. Anyway, she is a prepper, but she's also a preparation enthusiast. But I love her message, and I love her energy in which she's sharing it and the reason she's sharing it. And I think she's wonderful. And we had a great time talking about preparedness and what that's like and what that's about, and why it's important. So I hope that you enjoy this. And if you do enjoy this, if you think of anybody who might get something out of this, please feel free to share it with them. Feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening. It helps to get this in front of other listeners. We could always use that. We being me. If you really don't like the podcast, feel free to let me know. You can reach out to me any way you want to. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on email. I'm on Good Pods. You can reach out to me anywhere. And just let me know, because I want to be providing value for you. And if I am, feel free to let me know that too. I am never mad at good feedback. But I appreciate you listening so much. Make sure that you check out the show notes for any information that Brekke is adding in, and how to reach her. Thank you again for listening. I hope you have a great day. So today my guest is Brekke Wagoner, and she is a prepper, and probably not in the way that you might be thinking, but I will let her tell you about that. Brekke, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here.
So prepping has kind of a reputation, sort of a bad rap in some ways. But so if you can just tell us what prepping means to you and what exactly what you're talking about when you say you're a prepper.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So prepping for me is this idea of preparedness. So often when I talk to people who aren't in the prepping subculture, I say preparedness instead. One, people kind of get an idea if you say preparedness or emergency preparedness, they're like, oh, Yeah, I once saw a flyer about a 72-hour kit. Or yeah, I've got a first aid kit, right? There is some sense that they've learned sort of through osmosis or maybe a class in school or their neighborhood or something, where they're like, oh, emergencies, those are things. Like I've watched the news, or I live in the hurricane area, or there's tornadoes. Like they just know that there's that practical element. So when I'm talking to non-preppers, I usually say preparedness just for that reason. When I think about prepping and I use prepping, there's a subculture that identifies as preppers. It mostly arose after World War II in response to the fear about nuclear threats and the changing world we live in. And a lot of prepping is stuff that is actually common sense that we just don't do anymore, plus whatever else you want to add on. So the common sense piece is, having a big pantry, having a lot of food storage, something that your grandparents or maybe great grandparents would have considered normal before refrigeration was normalized and before our just-in-time grocery systems were common. If you lived anywhere but maybe major cities, you would probably have enough food to get by for a month or two because you don't know what your winter is going to be like. You don't know how long until the next shipment of something is going to be. That was just normal around the world. If you had the means, you put up what you needed to, and that was just the pattern of life. After World War II, with the way we changed our agricultural system and things like that, our whole system changed. So prepping for a lot of people is actually just really common sense stuff that our grandparents or great grandparents thought would have been normal, plus an eye towards, okay, there are different threats or insecurities around. So I am going to prepare in advance for those so that when they happen, if they happen, I'm ahead of the game. That kind of is, a big bird's eye view, but that's kind of the overview of what prepping is.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry. Preparedness. I apologize. I got a little out of hand. So we're talking about preparedness.
Well, either both work, but preparedness is a little bit easier.
It's a little easier on the mind for sure. Okay, yeah, and so so I know I was telling you this, but so I grew up in the Mormon church, and I did a lot of preparedness. I actually don't have a 72-hour kit, but I do have some food storage. And I was like, when COVID happened and everything was, the food shelves were bare and everything, I was like, cool, I'm okay. But then my Amazon auto ship of toilet paper was canceled, and I was having a panic attack. I was freaking out about my toilet paper. Where is my toilet paper coming from? Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so we bought a bidet. Like I was not having that. Food I can handle. Toilet paper, I was losing my mind.
Yeah. Listen, I keep a stash that my kids can't find, so I always know there's like a backup pack.
I'm your people. Brekke. We were talking before about Brekke trying to find her people, and so I'm her people. Anyway, so
I'm
Brekke,
so glad you're my people.
How did you get started doing this? Like, where did this? You said you've been doing this for about 3 years. How did you get into this?
Yeah, so the website and teaching on YouTube I started back in 2020 in response to the pandemic. Ooh. And realizing I'm an elder millennial, and most of my millennial friends were like, what do you mean I need to have toilet paper? What do you mean I need more than like a week of food in my fridge? I'm a minimalist. And I was like, and so my phone was blowing up once the toilet paper thing happened. They were like, what are you supposed to do? And I was like, got a phone book? Like, what do you want me to say? I've been telling you for years. And I realized that a lot of my friends, even friends, I lived in California, lived in the Bay Area for almost 5 years. And that there are a lot of people who will have things for like the big earthquake. They'll have their little box with like a flashlight and some water and, some granola bars and whatever, but they won't have things like extra toilet paper. and those the more likely thing to happen, which is, a storm might keep you from going to the grocery store or knock out your Amazon order, they don't have, but they might have, that 72-hour kit or something. So the channel, I'm on YouTube at Sustainable Prepping. It came out of wanting to be a progressive voice teaching preparedness, because most of the voices, the most popular and the loudest voices, are just conservative, but like very right wing to the point of kind of not being in our reality, using a lot of conspiracies that are harmful to kind of underscore why they prep. And, or they think the sky is falling every 5 minutes. A channel I used to watch a lot, and I won't name them because I don't want to shame anybody. It's one of the largest channels on YouTube doing it. Every 2 weeks, he says that World War III is happening, and has done since April of 2022. So it just, it's they sell fear, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be a fear-free space. So that's how I got into kind of doing it in a public way. I got into prepping in the subculture of prepping way back in 2016 because I lived in California and Donald Trump was elected president, and that terrified me. I was like, oh no. My personal view is I didn't trust him not to be vindictive in the event the big earthquake came to California, and I was afraid. And I grew up in a family that weren't preppers exactly, but we were living history reenactors. So did a lot of primitive camping, only using candles and no flashlights, only cooking over an open fire, with cast iron and not any of the newfangled camp stoves and things like that. I dressed up like Laura Ingalls and I wore the bonnet and I shot muzzle loaders. I mean, yeah, like the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And yeah, and that was great preparation for becoming a prepper, because so much of that I realize now was overlap. I can start a fire. It's been a while, but I could probably start a fire with flint and steel, for example. And I know how to deal with like wet firewood and like just things that how many of us would ever learn if you weren't doing that, or you weren't in a certain kind of scouting, or you said you were from the Mormon background, like things like your church might have taught you, or you learned from somebody. And I realized as I got into the prepping subculture back in 2016, I had a lot of skills that the average progressive didn't have. But I didn't know things like, well, how much food storage do you need? How do you keep it from going bad? What's a good rotational system? What kind of lighting? Those sorts of practical pieces. So I taught myself a lot, and I learned and I pulled and I learned from the Mormons and I learned from the crazy radical right-wing people, and tried to go la 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 la. I'm not listening to you tell me there are people like lizard people in human meat suits. Like I'm okay, and tell me about rice and beans. You know what I mean? And read a lot of books that weren't about preparedness, but were about community building and organizing. And then I came to this place in 2020 where I was like, there needs to be a voice that's teaching preparedness, that's not capitalizing on people's fear, which I try not to do, that's addressing climate change, because that's realistically the biggest threat to all of us is climate change. And we're more likely to face storms because of climate change than anything else. And we need a voice that has a more feminist, like an intersectional, environmental feminist perspective on preparedness, that doesn't teach go it alone and screw everybody else and you have to take care of your family, because that's what most preppers teach. I mean, even friends of mine that I like and I admire, yesterday, two different of my friends had reels on Instagram that were like, it's nobody else's responsibility to take care of you but you. You got to do it. No one's coming to help you. And I'm like, what a bleak vision of the world. What a bleak way to see the world. Feminism and intersectionality would say, no. We're stronger when we are a collective community unit, when we pool our skills and our resources and our talents and our knowledge. Why would you think that
We're
you can do it all
stronger
by yourself?
together. Yeah.
Exactly. So my hope is to push against some of those less helpful strains in the prepping community, and then to bring preparedness to like everyday life. My dream is like a million millennials prepping, and if you're not a millennial, still get on board. Come on, Gen X, baby boomers, zoomers, come on, I'm here for everybody. I just happen to be a millennial, but I want to get to a million like normal everyday people that don't know anything about prepping, getting them ready. Because for me, if more people have the resources they need in an emergency, then when emergency services come, they aren't going to drain resources, and people who don't have the means or ability to prep ahead of time can then be given those resources. So I happen to be a Christian. I'm a very radical leftist Christian. And for me, when people ask, well, aren't you hoarding? For me, it's no, I'm going to take care of me so that when the disaster comes, the resources brought to the disaster area, I don't have to be a drain because I have the means. I can give my portion, if you will, to the people who don't have the means, right? Like this is me preparing for that and then being able to be generous and then being able to be healthy and well because I can be fed, I can be nourished, I've got first aid to go be a helper. So
Right.
we covered a big swath, but that's, my hope is fear-free, calm preparedness for everybody. No conspiracy theories needed.
None needed. Yeah. I mean, seriously, I am your people. I have a post-it note. I have a post-it note behind me on the wall that says community sufficiency. So
Yes.
just like you know, we're stronger together. You know, there are so many things that I can do on my own, but it's less fun. Like it's so much better if you're not by yourself. Like the people that say, you know, I can do it all by myself. Like, but do you want to? Do you want to be like that forever? Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have, I mean, this would be a whole podcast just on this topic, but I think we have this nostalgic way of thinking about the past. Preppers are certainly in this category. And like you hear people talk about, well, back, Ma Ingalls, she did so much and blah, blah, blah. And I want to say, first of all, those are storybooks. Okay. Second of all, as a living history reenactor, those skills are better in community. Like one person didn't chop all their own firewood. You got a whole group of people together and all the kids chopped a bunch for everybody. And so slowly but surely everybody got all that they needed. And you didn't have to hope that no one in your family threw out their back. Back in the day, women would have bread baking days and they would bake a bunch of bread for, the week and they would chat and they would be social and then they, go back to their farms. Or they would have, canning days and they would get together for like 2 or 3 days and they'd can their pants off. And they didn't wear pants. They'd work their tail ends off and then they'd be done, but it would be social. So you're sharing the labor. Look at the Amish. When they move a barn, it's not one dude, it's like all of them. Every Amish man who can helps move a barn, and that's all you can do without electricity, but they can't function without community. And yet prepping in particular, but all of us can look back at the past with this nostalgia lens, and that doesn't actually serve us because we're not seeing the reality and we're not gleaning the reality, which would say there's a reason why homesteaders failed, right? Most homesteaders failed, and they moved and created towns. Most people didn't end up on farms isolated from everyone. They would live together, like 4 or 5 houses together, and then their farms would go out away from them because you needed those people to make it through. Even Laura Ingalls in The Long Winter, they have the kerosene lamp go out, and that's it for like weeks. They don't have any light. Terrifying. I mean, they all could have died, right? That's not romantic to me. That's not what I aspire to, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm preparing to avoid that. Like, that's literally preparing to avoid that reality. And I can't do it by myself. My husband and I can't do it by ourselves. We have chronic illness and chronic pain in our family, and some kids with some health needs, and we can't do it alone. So why would we ever want to,
Right. Well, and yeah, there's just no reason. It's just not necessary.
Yeah, no.
And it's just so much. It's more fun.
Yes.
Life is more fun. Like, if the ladies that were canning their pants off, if they were sharing stories and they were, sharing skills and, oh, you're better at the peeling part. You go ahead and you peel your pants off. You go right ahead and I will blanch or I will, whatever. Like everyone, there's a lady that I've been following on Instagram and I want to say she's in Florida and it's her first year gardening and she has this huge pile of tomatoes and she lives alone. She's like, I have no one to help me and I have to do this like right away. I'm like, I wish I was there. I wish I could help you make friends.
Yeah.
Make
Tell
friends,
people
please.
that they can take a whole basket home if they come and help you pick and do. And I know it's, that to me is one of the fears I have, is this rugged individualism that we teach ourselves and we tell ourselves here in the
Hmm.
United States. And I think that's more dangerous than a lot of things because one, we have this romantic notion we can make it on our own, which we can't. But two, it makes us afraid of other people. And
Hmm.
that's a big thing in prepping, is this, you can't come to my house. I've taken care of me. And if you haven't taken care of you, screw you.
Yeah.
And that just, I mean, for my religious beliefs, I'm like, sounds a lot like Jesus, huh? I'm like,
That's so
y'all,
Christ-like.
that is, I read the Bible a couple times. I can read Hebrew and Greek. I don't know that I've ever heard that, but okay. You do you, I guess. But yeah, that idea that you would be suspicious of your neighbor rather than welcoming, I mean, that's going to do more damage to us, I think, than it's going to create a secondary crisis, right? I don't know if you've ever read A Paradise Built in Hell. I can't think of the name. It's a nonfiction kind of social sciences sociology look at the post cataclysm, like different events when there's been a catastrophe, how people have responded. And it was basically pushing back against the narrative after Katrina that everything went to heck in a handbasket and it was just a total hellscape and blah, blah, blah. Because actually, when researchers went back in to figure out what went wrong, people started being like, well, really, we sort of exaggerated for the media. We sort of exaggerated to get more funds. The looting wasn't as bad as we said, or what, like there was a realization that a lot of what people were saying went wrong didn't happen, or was exaggerated, or it was isolated. So things like the big
Ugh.
Superdome were problematic. There was a lot of terrible things that happened there. But like the French Quarter was fine. I mean, by and large, they had very little flooding, thank goodness, but also like everybody was helping everybody out, right? Like this is a community that identifies as a community. There's a reason why,
Right.
if you think about, New Orleans, can you name any of the other quarters? Probably not. But the French Quarter, right? Because there's like a vibe. People know each other. And the other areas weren't as cohesive. And so she was kind of doing some research. Anyway, what she found was in a lot of areas after a catastrophe of some kind, people actually helped each other, and people will remember the catastrophe with a kind of weird nostalgia because there were really good things that came out of it. So the very first one in the book is the one I remember the best, and it was about the earthquake in San Francisco. And like people would remember it and say it was the best time of their lives because everybody who survived was helping each other. And there was like a piano that was wheeled out of a broken down house and someone was just playing, and somebody else started a soup kitchen, and somebody else who was an opera singer would sing at night so that people would be entertained. And it was the most community that they'd had.
Right.
Right. And this is the early 1900s, before we're as isolated as we are now, before suburbia existed, and people look back on the catastrophe and they say, there was loss and it was awful, and yet there were these wonderful memories. I have memories of singing show tunes with so and so, and sitting next to somebody as we ate our broth, and we did this, and it was, and
Right.
so
Because
that
they
was
had
really,
company and community, they found joy together. Yeah.
yeah, and they had meaning. They had
Hmm.
meaning. And I read another book which is totally escaping me now, but it was talking about how during the Blitz in London, they actually had less people in mental asylums dealing with like crippling depression, because they suddenly had absolute purpose. And so a lot of people who had been, and then this was early, we didn't understand depression the way we understand now. So I want to say that. But people who were just, I mean, they were in institutions. And again, people got institutionalized for all kinds of reasons, in a way we don't do today. But they had people who they thought would just waste away. Suddenly, there's bombs going off. I mean, like it is life or death. And they are totally functional and totally fine because they have absolute purpose in a
Hmm.
way that wasn't offered to them anymore.
Right.
I do not remember that book, and if I think of it, I will send it to you. But I remember reading that, and that all of these things, which are not prepper things, like neither of these books are geared towards preppers. They are
Sure.
histories and social commentaries. They have nothing to do with emergency preparedness, and yet they have informed how I think about it. Because when a crisis comes, my goodness, will we be so much better off? History has shown we're so much better off when we're doing it together.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, wow. So you said you started this in 2016, but you picked it up for real in like 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. Um,
I started teaching it. I started publicly talking about it on YouTube. I started
gotcha.
the YouTube channel in 2020.
Gotcha.
I went 2 feet into prepper land in 2016. And I would say probably for maybe, well, even into college, I probably had an ear to the ground with prepping just because I was into like living history and like bushcrafting and those sort of like back to the land skills. And there's an overlap there. But I didn't go all in until 2016. And I didn't decide to start talking about it publicly and teaching until 2020, the end of 2020, when I was like, all right, friends, someone's gonna say it. So I'll put myself out there. Have iPhone will record, you know what I mean?
Right. Oh my gosh. Right. Wow. That pandemic just really opened up a whole world for a lot of people.
And I think it shows us just how fragile our systems are. Um, we think about climate, and a lot of us just have no idea how fragile our ecosystems are, where our agricultural systems are at, how precarious everything is, because there's plenty of food on the shelves, and your Amazon delivery still gets here in 24 hours. And um, we are not yet feeling those effects. We are very insulated. I'm currently listening to the audiobook of This Is How the World Ends by Jeff Nesbitt. I don't know if you've read it. Um, it isn't as bleak as it sounds, but it is a very sobering look at the climate crisis. And it's a couple of years old, so it's not even the most recent data. But one of the things he talks about is the United States in particular hasn't seen droughts the way that like sub-Saharan Africa has. We don't see the glaciers melting the way that someone who lives in the Alps sees. We are sort of, the majority of us are insulated from the immediate effects. So we just can kind of plug our ears and go la 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 la. And yet it's coming regardless. And it's been interesting because his whole argument is, I'm telling you all this data because you're not going to see it if you don't see the data. And I'm going to give you points that you can start looking at. So, like migration of birds and things like that, that you as an average person can start kind of keeping an eye on so that you can begin to see the actual shift for climate stuff. Supposedly at the end of the book, he gives us some hopeful things, but it's sobering, and you can have a lot of anxiety about it. And so for me, I respond to that anxiety with preparedness. It's like, okay, there's some crappy stuff coming, and I don't know how we're going to turn this ship around, but I'll hopefully be alive, or my kids will be alive. So I want them to be situated the best possible way. And how can I do that? Through preparedness.
Right. Tell me what he said about the migration of birds, because we like have lost all our birds.
Yeah, there was a woman, gosh, I wish I had notes. There was a woman who was a climate scientist who won several awards for her research on bird migration. And I just listened to this chapter last night, and he was reflecting from her. This was in the 90s, late like 98. Okay, so it's been a while. But he interviewed her for a magazine he was working at, and she said birds are moving farther and farther north because it's too hot. Their climate is changing. So whole regions are losing their bird population because the climate is getting hotter. So in order to maintain their comfortable climate, they're literally moving north.
Right.
I saw a headline that said Brazil this year has said they lost 150 river dolphins because the water was too hot. And the average temperature of the water of the summer was like 105 degrees Fahrenheit. and it killed 150 river dolphins. So, I mean, climate change is so real. We've had a hurricane off the West Coast that should be impossible, right? But rising sea temperatures and changing weather patterns because of climate change is changing everything. More storms, more intensely. Well, how do you deal with that? Well, you can live differently in order to help slow down climate change, which I think is sort of what you're talking about and why you're bringing people on. And I'm trying to do that too, but that's not my area of specialty, right? I'm fumbling along like everybody else, trying to do better with a lighter carbon footprint and being mindful of that and how you can live differently now to prepare for a different future. And you can prepare for that future. And that future is likely going to be food shortages as we figure out the new agricultural system in light of climate change. That future is going to be possible storms that create acute disasters that aren't permanent, but certainly can limit your ability to get the goods and services you're used to having. And that can be preparing for civil unrest that is fueled by climate insecurity, water, right? Political discord, our crumbling infrastructure here in the United States, right? And if you know those things are coming, you could be paralyzed with fear and then ignore it because that's what most of us do. Or you can say, okay, how do I address it? What can I do? How do I be proactive? And once you decide that you're going to be proactive, well, then it's easy. You just start making a plan and you just start chipping away at that plan. It's not going to happen overnight, but you just start chipping away at that plan. My first recommendation for anybody listening to this that's interested in being prepared is to get water. Water, you can live up to 3 weeks without food, right? Jesus went 40 days in the desert. All right, you can do it. But water you have to have. So get 7 days of water, 1 gallon per person per day for every member of your family plus pets. So have clean water, get a week's worth. 72 hours is not enough. All these disasters we hear about are way longer than 3 days. So try to do 7 days. And when you master 7 days, then you can double it and you have 2 weeks, right? But start with water. Get a water filter. Right now it's Amazon Prime Day. Life straws are $15. It doesn't have to be a lot. You just get something. Get yourself some food, get yourself some headlamps, get yourself a few of these things. And then once you have them, then you can breathe deep. You can make the bigger plan and do the next thing. So I think it's just once you realize it's a problem, then you can start making a plan, and then it's just sticking to your plan and not letting your fear be the driver.
Okay.
You don't want the fear to be the driver.
Okay. Well, so that leads me to my next question. Actually, you started to answer that. So when you're filling your pantry or whatever, like when you're preparing, oh my goodness, what kind of things are you doing? You said, like headlamps or flashlights and the life straws or whatever, but like, do you shop sales? Do you garden and can your food, or do you buy bulk food, or do you have like clothing packed up or stuff like that?
Yeah. So I teach a 3-tiered prepping. It's mostly food storage, but you could really do anything this way. And I teach it in 3 tiers. Your first tier is your working pantry. So this is everything you're using right now. This is that jar of pasta sauce you're going to grab. This is the open, container of sugar that you use to bake. This is what's in your fridge and freezer, right? This is your everyday stuff. And your family has to know what you can afford, what you have the space for. But for my family, we try to have 6 to 8 weeks between all of that, right? So we are going to buy a quarter of a cow from a local farmer in November, and that's going to last us a year, right? And if a disaster happens at the end of that year, well, I guess we're not eating beef, you know what I mean? But this is just all the stuff that you can go to the grocery store right now and just stick on your shelves, and you're going to use it. Like, this is just stuff you use. This is your cereal. This is your favorite coffee creamer. This is whatever it is that you have. And my recommendation is this is where you start. If you're someone who is normally only has 1 or 2 weeks of food, I would recommend you start to get to a month, and then you get to 2 months if you have the space and the funds to do so. And you can do this by looking at what you normally eat. If you have pasta one night a week, then try to get to that. You have always have a month's worth of pasta on your shelf, right? This is stuff that our grandparents would have naturally done, but it just isn't something that we teach anymore. Um, then if you can, double that and get to 6 to 8 weeks, I think that's reasonable for most of us. Beyond that, I think it gets a little bit unmanageable if you're not cooking all the time. But 6 to 8 weeks, or even just 1 month of a pantry that's working, that's your first line of defense, because this is going to be the stuff you reach for. If there's a grid down situation, you're going to have to eat through that fridge and freezer as quickly as possible, right? Unless you have a generator to keep the freezer going. This is going to be if something happens and someone in your family gets sick and oh my goodness, there's no time to go to the grocery store because you're dealing with this family illness and you're going back and forth to the hospital. And what are you going to do? You have food on the pantry shelves. You don't have to worry about it. Or get laid off from your job. I mean, heaven forbid, right? That your income gets cut in half or something like that. Now you got a pantry. You don't have to worry about the emergency food. This is just your everyday stuff.
Right.
So that's where I would say start. And that can be your toiletries, right? That's having, 2 months worth of your favorite body care products and your laundry detergent. That stuff, if you have the ability to buy, from like Costco in bulk or something, and you can get 6 months or a year, and you get a year's worth of toilet paper if you have a place to put it, right? Like go to town, that doesn't go bad. But I think the first place is that working pantry. The second thing then is dedicated food storage. And that's what most of us think about is dedicated food storage. That's the rice and beans in the big buckets. That's the freeze-dried number 10 cans, right? So in my system, you do 2 levels. Your mid-tier is usually like a box or several boxes, depending on how big your family is. They can go under a bed or in a closet. And it is mostly conventional items. So that conventionally canned beans, for example, conventionally canned tomatoes. If you home can, you could put them in there. But you want to try to do from 1 month up to 3 months that is not in your pantry.
Yeah.
This way, if you're at the end of your, grocery trip season, right? Maybe you just got back from vacation. Your pantry's looking a little dim because you were gone for a week, right? And then all of a sudden, before you go to the grocery store, you're slammed by an emergency. You don't have to worry if your pantry's perfect because you have a whole dedicated box of food storage that's separate. You don't have to worry if a rodent gets into your pantry or there's an infestation or if there's a water leak and your pantry gets messed up. There's a dedicated food storage that's familiar. It's what you already use. It's not expensive. You're not having to buy the freeze-dried stuff. And you plan for it. You start with 1 week and then you double it to 2 weeks. And you take that 2 weeks and you double it to 4 weeks. Okay, take a deep breath. Look at your finances. Look at your space. If you can double that to 2 months, great. If you can get up to 3 months, hallelujah, praise the Lord. And then you can take a break because I think more than 3 months nobody needs. Okay, I think that's too much. That's to me the mid-tier. Every year you look at your stuff, you take out anything that's expired, you put it or getting ready to expire, you either put it in your pantry to use because here's a note, canned goods, as long as they're not dented, are fine after the expiration date for a couple of years even. So don't stress about that. You can still eat it. You can donate it to a pantry, so it will get used. Then you just replace it. You stick it back under your bed or back in your closet, and then you don't worry about it again, right? It's an annual investment. And you have to think about it. And now you have your month of food storage. You have your month or 2 of pantry items. That's 3 months right there. But let's say you really, really want to be like super prepped, right? That little bit of Mormon in you is like, gotta have it all, right? That's where the Mylar buckets of rice and beans come in to me. That's the last level. And you can integrate it into the other levels if you eat lots of dried rice and beans. But if you don't, if it's something that for you would be very, very much an emergency food, do that last. Put them up, figure out how much you would need for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. Again, I think more than 3 months is way more than anyone needs. You figure it out, you stick it in the closet, and then you just check on it every year or two, make sure nothing gets into it, but then it's good for like 30 years and you just don't have to think about it. And this way you have levels. You don't have to tackle the whole thing at once.
Right.
You're not looking at a checklist that says if you have a family of 4, you need 1,200 pounds of grains for a year. And you look at that and you go,
get it by Tuesday.
Yeah. Oh my God, how am I supposed to do this? And what if you don't eat beans? What if you've never cooked dried beans in your life? Or you've only ever done it in an instant pot, which might not be available to you if the power is out. Then don't store dried beans. That should not be the top of your list. Pre-canned beans and the little aluminum can should be the thing that you're storing, because you don't know how to use the other ones and they'll mess up your stomach, and we don't want that. So, my philosophy is make it practical, make it easy bar of entry, have a great working pantry, then do your dedicated storage box. If that doesn't feel like enough for you, then go do the big buckets and things. Or if you have a really big family, then buying in bulk and doing the buckets and things might be useful. If you've got 4 or 6 kids, or you've got, in-laws that live with you, or you're providing for a community and not just your individual family, that can be a very useful tool. But for most of us, if you live in an apartment, where are you going to put those buckets? You're not going to put those buckets. But you might be able to get a tote full of stuff that you slide under bed, right? Maybe you slide it in between your couch and little side table. You just create a little nook. You just stick it in there and cover it up with a pretty towel or something. I lived in a tiny little, well, it wasn't even an apartment. I rented a room in someone's townhouse. I didn't have room for jack squat, so I had to be very inventive of where I was going to put all my prepper stuff.
I gotta tell you guys, I'm really excited actually about my True Leaf Market cover crop seeds that I've put in my garden in the last couple of weeks. They're already starting to sprout seedlings, and if you follow me on Instagram at all, you saw my picture of the tiny carrot, which was my whole carrot harvest this year, because my soil is very it's got a lot of clay, and so it was too hard, I think, for the carrots to grow down. And so I've been working with a no-tilling method, which I think my soil is just not cut out for. But so now that I have these cover crop seeds and the cover crops, I'm just going to till that in the spring, and all those nutrients are going to go into the soil. And I'm so excited to see how this is going to help. So anyway, I'm psyched about this. And I would love for you guys to get to play with this as well. So check out trueleafmarket.com, use code GROUNDED and then the number 10 to get $10 off of your $50 or more purchase. And that's for cover crops, or you can get a sprouting kit or microgreens kit or seeds, or seeds for gardening, or anything that they have on their website, which is massive. So definitely check it out. Remember the code and have fun shopping.
Hey there, my name is Carly and I am the host of Consciously Clueless. This is the podcast where you come to because you want to learn how to live a healthier life, how to live more sustainably, how to take your everyday actions and make them work for you and the planet. Sometimes it feels like maybe you've got some of this figured out, and other times you probably feel lost. That's why I'm here. Together we'll learn how to live happier, healthier lives without the need to be perfect, and always allowing a little space for cluelessness on this journey to living a more conscious life. Go to consciouslyclueless.buzzsprout.com/share to find your favorite listening app and take a listen to Consciously Clueless. I can't wait to connect with you.
So, my whole recommendations are really start with what you already eat, just bulk up what you have, learn some skills like fire starting, for example, practice cooking over an open fire if you have the access to do so, get some good headlamps. I suggest, don't bother with the little flashlights like this. Get headlamp or handheld. I know you guys can't see on the audio podcast, right? Not the handheld flashlights, but a headlamp, so that if you do have a long-term power outage, your hands can be free and you can cook and whatever. Maybe get 1 or 2 lamps that can light the room. You live in Maine, so start planning ahead for winter. If you don't have a way to keep yourself warm if the heat goes out, if you're snowed in, figure that out. You can put a tent inside your living room and cover it with as many blankets as you can and snuggle in and try to create your microclimate, right? This is stuff that a lot of people know, but they don't think about. And when you're in a crisis, you're not using your intellectual brain, you're panicking, right? So if you have some of his stuff and you can go, okay, I'm just gonna go to my box. I've got my kits, I've got my boxes, I've got my stuff. Then you can begin to come out of that panic because you are okay.
Right.
And when you're okay, you can lead. You're not going to be manipulated by people trying to make you afraid, right? You can organize community members who are panicking more than you. And man, we need that. We're going to need that when those crises come.
Hmm. Wow. I love the way that you ended that. Just that and it's not even just being prepared, but just the easing your mind, like when that time comes, because I am that person. Like I will just walk around in circles because I don't even know where to start. But because I've planned ahead, because I have that food storage, because I have my toilet paper, I I can breathe easy. And I can check on my neighbors and make sure that everyone has what they need. And, you know, if we have a wood stove, so does anyone need to be warm? You know, that type of thing. Yeah, because you have that peace of mind, because you are prepared, you can help others. And that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
And I also love that you were like, hello, knock, knock. If those cans aren't dented, they're okay.
Yes. Yes. If they aren't dented, if they are not in any way deformed, there's no bulging, there's no denting, and when you open them, everything smells and looks okay. Eat it, right? After about 5 or 6 years, the nutritional quality begins to diminish a little bit. The vitamins break down, but like it's still calories. Now, I'm not advocating you keep cans for 5 years. Like, don't do that. Cycle through, my friend. Cycle through. But if you happen to have one that slips your notice, as long as it's not rusted, as long as it doesn't look janky, have a good brain in there. Use your good brain, okay? But yeah, listen, I think the worst thing that prepping has done is to try to make it this like get your things of rice and beans and whatever and sugar for a year and salt for a year and you need sugar and salt. Like, yes, those are important. But like I don't even know how much salt I use in a year, or how much sugar I use in a year. Like I don't bake at home, so I don't use a ton often. It's only during the holidays. I'm not a home baker all the time. It's not my passion. I wish it was, but I'm impatient, so I'm not a great baker. So I have a giant thing of sugar. I use a 5-gallon bucket for sugar because it's just easier to buy it in bulk, and then it's easier to store it that way. But it's not always for everyone. And if you're not interested in being a homesteader and growing all your own food and home preserving, maybe you're too busy for that. How do you make prepping accessible? Well, start with what you need every day. Start with your pantry. And then once you have a pantry that feels good and fits in the space you have, build your box. If you have an okay pantry right now, go build your box. Go get that 7 days of water, right? Go buy a water filter on the Amazon Prime sale, or say wait for Black Friday and order one or something. Go build yourself a emergency potty, right? Like go have that just in case you can't use yours, right? Yeah. Go take a class on first aid. You don't have to become an herbalist to like go buy the modern day equipment. Do you know why? I'd rather you have the modern day tech and then go find yourself an herbalist when the time comes, and to like waste your time with herbalism if that's not your passion. You know what I mean? Like I think we talked before about, self-sufficiency being such a terrible myth. You don't need to learn everything. You don't need to have everything. What you need is the things that are going to help you in your context with your specific family's needs and abilities and desires to be calm and competent so that you can lead and support those who don't have the access that you have now. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I just, I think making it accessible, you don't need to have a year's supply of food. Don't worry about that. Have 1 month. And then when you have the means and ability, get to 2 months. And honestly, the likelihood of any of us not having to relocate from our homes after 3 months of a major emergency is very slim. So I think, that's the upper limit. And then you're good. I mean, you're not good forever. Like, I'm not saying that you're going to be fine and you're going to be cozy and you're going to be able to sip your tea while the world burns around you. But those immediate needs, will be okay. I am not saying that zombies will not attack your house because you have food storage. Okay. But I am saying when the zombies are attacking, you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat that night.
Oh my gosh, Brecky. Oh my gosh. Oh, Jesus. That's awesome. So true. So true. And yeah, I mean, like the phrase that has come up with me several times over the last 24 hours is start where you are. And so where you said, start with your pantry. Like, what do you use? And, just
Absolutely.
build on that. That's beautiful. Like, don't buy things that you're not going to use.
Yes.
My
Don't eat
gosh.
what you store and store what you eat. Yeah. Absolutely.
But so this is super, super helpful. My gosh, it's so interesting how many ways we can help each other. Just how many skills everyone has and how we can all work together in our community sufficiency.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Community sufficiency. I'm going to borrow that. It's true. If we're better as a team, we're definitely all better together.
Yeah, for sure. So, so Brecky, what does the word sustainability mean to you personally?
Sustainability, I was thinking about this a lot, and for a lot of folks, they define sustainability by the things that they do to be sustainable, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to ask your listeners to join with me on a thought experiment for 2 minutes. I read a wonderful book that I'm forgetting the title of exactly now by a gentleman named Amartya Sen. He used to be one of the masters at St. John's College in Cambridge. He's originally from India. He's an incredible economist. And in his book, I want to say it's something like Economics as Freedom. He basically posits, he's a Nobel laureate, I believe. He basically posits that money is just life chances. Like money really is just life chances. The more money you have, the more life chances you have. And he, it's a whole book. So clearly it's more deep than that. But that worldview has shaped so much of how I think. And when I think about sustainability, because I think about, finances as life chances, I think about how do I live in such a way that I sustain the life chances of everything on the planet for what we have now and hopefully increase to give them back more life chances. Does that make sense? So right now, the way that a lot of us live, we're actually lessening the life chances because we are extracting fossil fuels and what microplastics and global warming and whatever you want, whatever your particular nugget in the climate catastrophe scenario is. But sustainability is sustaining as many life chances as possible for the global community. And I don't just mean people, I mean the all living beings. And that gives me a really big picture to go, okay, is this something that sustains life chances? And that's how I kind of evaluate what is sustainability for myself. Is this sustaining or increasing life chances? And if it isn't, then how do I change the way I live?
Hmm. So it's not necessarily finances, but it's just like it's
Yes, it's
a
not about
metaphor.
money, it's about life chances.
Right.
Yeah, or options. Yeah.
Okay.
It's such a wild thing to think about at first, but it's true. People with money can have the option to throw money at any problem they want, right? You don't want to live in a place where the salt water is encroaching on the fresh water. You have the life chances to get off the island because you have money. You can trade your money for the option to leave. If you don't have money, you lose that life chance. So if we take that back and we go, okay, how can we sustain as many life chances as possible? Well, if people don't have the option to live on the island that was their indigenous home because of increasing seawater, they've lost life chances, right? That option is gone. So how do I live in a way that sustains their option, their life chance to stay where they are, if that's what they want, right? So I know it's a kind of a left field look, but it helps me when I evaluate my priorities with environmental justice and when you have to make compromises, which unfortunately we do, right? How do I do my best to sustain the most life chances for the global community as possible?
Gotcha. Interesting. I like that. Okay.
I know it's probably a little bit odd, but that's how I think of sustainability.
No, I love being made to think. It's if everyone thought exactly the same way, it would be less interesting. But that's, it's good to open up the mind and to make that work. So thank you. And then, so this has been super interesting. And so if somebody is wanting to follow you and say, I need more Brekke, give me more Brekke, please. How can they find you or follow you or whatever, or both?
Yeah, I'm most active on YouTube and Instagram. So you can find me on YouTube at Sustainable Prepping. I'm the only sustainable prepping out there. You'll find me. And then on Instagram, I'm at sustainable_prepping, PREPPING. And you can certainly follow me there. I have a website, sustainableprepping.com. I have a food storage course, and I have some blog posts and things like that. But mostly, if you want to interact with me or be able to ask me questions, the best place is YouTube or Instagram.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. This has
Oh,
been
thank you for
eye-opening
having me.
and so fun. And I'm
this has
so
been a delight.
glad. I'm so glad to get to actually talk to you like face to face. I just want to take a moment and thank my guest again for speaking with me and sharing such great information. I also need to thank Buzzsprout for hosting this podcast, for Jane Bolduck and her amazing music genius, for Becca Coffron and her beautiful artwork. And I'd like to thank you for listening. Please check out the show notes. I'm going to have links posted in there if you would like to follow this guest and learn more about them. Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
There'll come a day, my mama told me, when I find love to have and hold me, a heart that's strong and so sincere. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? Oh, tell me, get there from here, 'cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound to find me. We'll find a way to soothe the sickness, we'll heal the hate, with sweet forgiveness. Wages of war will disappear. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? I wonder, how do I get there from here? Yeah, 'cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound to find me. When that state of grace has finally found me, well, there'll be music, and good friends around me, yeah. And I'll just smile through happy tears and wonder,